This week, a Lion Week in Review special report. We traveled to Washington, D.C. and the Museum of the Bible as President Trump announces his America Prays initiative. You'll also hear conversations after the president's remarks from the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, who chairs the President's Religious Liberty Commission. Then the founder of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, Ralph Reid, on the resurgent importance of the evangelical vote in the last election cycle and beyond.
For thousands of years, the Bible has shaped civilization, ethics, art, and literature, and it's brought hope, healing, and transformation to untold millions and millions of lives. The Bible is also an important part of the American story. That's why I'm delighted to announce that just moments ago, I personally delivered the Trump Family Bible given to me by my mother. I remember the time she gave it to me. But it was used in both my inaugurations and also display at the museum. And I guess it will now be displayed right in the heart of our nation's capital, right here. And that's an honor. That's an honor. We're here this morning to discuss the grave threats to religious liberty in American schools. And you know what's going on. We all know what's going on. But I will tell you, a lot of progress has been made in the last 8 months. Tremendous progress, more than I thought we could make in so many ways. Not only that, the woke agenda is practically gone. It's deep-seated. We have to make sure it's out. It's very bad. It's like a weed. You think you killed it, and then it starts growing again. So we have to be careful, but it's very, very different than it was. You look at West Point, how proud they are of their heritage. They did something this week which I thought was appropriate. Some of you know what that is. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, I like it. I like it. Oh, look at who we have over here. We have your associate, Pam, huh? Leo 2.0. Thanks. Well, we have Leo here. Is he doing a good job, Pam? That's great. He's at DOJ. He's a great man. He's a great friend of mine for a long time. I'm glad I got to see him. I would have been in big trouble, Pam, if I didn't see him. But thank you, Leo, very much. I appreciate it. For most of our country's history, the Bible was found in every classroom in the nation. Yet in many schools today, students are instead indoctrinated with anti-religious propaganda, and some are even punished for their religious beliefs, and very, very strongly punished. It's ridiculous. Joining us this morning is Hannah Allen from Honey Grove, Texas. A few years ago, Hannah organized a group of her classmates to pray for an injured peer. The school principal declared that Hannah's generous act of love was prohibited from taking place in front of the other students. Didn't like it. The principal didn't like it. Can you imagine? But Hannah very strongly stood her ground, and she won. And Hannah, I just want to thank you for letting the light of your faith shine for all of those to see. We really appreciate it. And where is Hannah? Is Hannah here someplace? I think so. Hannah, stand up, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hannah. I know what you went through. I know what you went through. It's great. Appreciate it. To support students like Hannah, I'm pleased to announce this morning that the Department of Education will soon issue new guidance protecting the right to prayer in our public schools, and it's total protection. Thank you, Hannah. Great job. And I began my remarks today by noting that the reverence for our Creator, we have reverence for our Creator, and it's inscribed into our Declaration of Independence, a copy of which I have very proudly hanging in the Oval Office, an original copy, very old, beautiful copy. Next year, we will celebrate 250 years since that declaration was signed. As part of the grand, well, this is really a commemoration like I think we're going to try and do a commemoration like nobody's ever seen before. But we've invited America's great faith communities to pray for our nation and for our people and for peace in the world. And it's going to be an amazing time. We're going to have an amazing time. We have the Olympics, we have the World Cup, and we have 250. Okay, the Super Centennial. as our man would say.
Coming up next on the Lion Week in Review, I sit down with Eric Trump, his first reaction to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and the important new book on the weaponization of the government against his family, and why he says what happened to Charlie wasn't entirely surprising. That's as the Lion Week in Review continues. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. If you missed any of today's show, you can always catch it and every edition of the show on YouTube, and be sure to keep up on all the latest news every day at readlion.com. Now, one-on-one with Eric Trump as he discusses his new book, Under Siege, detailing all the Trump family has endured since his father's famous trip down that golden escalator in 2015. I'm talking about the President of the United States. I'm talking about one of the sons of the President of the United States, Eric Trump. He's the Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization. He's authored a brand new book about his family called Under Siege, My Family's Fight to Save Our Nation. Eric, it is a thrill to have you back, sir. Good morning.
It's great to be back, Chris.
I'd love to get your first reaction. I've not heard much from you on this, nor have I talked to you about it, certainly, about what has happened to Charlie Kirk, who I know was a friend of yours and a family friend. I'd just like to get your first thoughts.
Yeah, Charlie was a dear friend of mine, and a dear friend of the whole family. He's a great friend of Don's, and obviously it's heartbreaking. And it's exactly, you mentioned the book and kind of the intro, Under Siege, and I started writing that a couple of years ago before they tried to kill my father, and before obviously they killed Charlie. And they've done everything they could to put the movement exactly that under siege, right? They tried to impeach my father twice. They made up dirty dossiers. They made up the Russian hoax. They took him off of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. They silenced conservatives all across the country. They debanked our company. They came after us with every AG and DA all over the nation. They removed him from the ballot of Maine and Colorado. They charged him with 91 felonies for doing absolutely nothing wrong. They raided his home. The FBI, the DOJ, they spied on his campaign. I mean, I could go on. And then, ultimately they tried to kill him in Butler, Pennsylvania, and then somebody tried to kill him a couple weeks later in Florida at the golf course, as you know too well. And they went after Kavanaugh as well, and Steve Scalise, and that's what this is, Chris. It's under siege, and it's exactly what I wrote about. I wrote about all kind of the behind-the-scenes stories of what they've done to our family over the last 10 years, what they did to the political movement. And they wanted to take a guy like Charlie Kirk out because he was incredibly effective. He had an incredible mouthpiece. He literally transcended an entire generation, changed the indoctrination that they were facing on college campuses. Built one of the greatest youth political movements in history, probably the greatest youth political movements, and then somebody dressed in all black sits on top of a roof with a rifle, while calling him a fascist for exercising free speech, and and kills a dear friend of ours, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. We all loved him, and he's a big part of where we are today.
I'm so grateful you wrote this book called Under Siege, My Family's Fight to Save Our Nation, Eric Trump, because you can chronicle this better than anybody. You told the story better than anybody. I remember vividly your reaction at the RNC when you first came forward and spoke publicly about the attempt on your father's life. And you spoke, not that this didn't touch every member of your family and really all of us who care about this president, but you seemed uniquely, for want of a better word, pissed. You were mad that it had gotten to this place, because I think what I sensed in you was you knew the tone and tenor of the American left had ratcheted it up to such a degree it drove us to this day. Have I accurately summarized your feelings at that moment?
Yeah, and it's exact. Honestly, I literally, I'm beyond pissed in so many ways. I think our entire party is pissed. I think this entire country's pissed, and I think that's why you've seen so many people attack to the right. And I wrote every word in this book because I am pissed, and it's raw and it's unfiltered, and it is just a true story that needs to be heard. I can tell you the New York Times and a lot of other people aren't going to be thrilled. It instantly went to #1 on Amazon. I was thrilled. I mean, literally 3 days into it, it was sitting at the top of the Amazon charts, and it's doing obviously tremendously well. But I think it's we don't have time to sugarcoat things anymore. I mean, what they tried to do to a man, what they tried to do to a family, what they tried to do to a nation is unthinkable. And I go into it in granularity. And Chris, for every one thing that you talked about on the radio every single day, and you covered it as well as anyone, there was 1,000 hits behind the scenes. I mean, they wanted us gone. They wanted us bankrupt. They tried to take the name off of every single building we have in New York. I mean, They wanted him, they wanted him to be gagged, no voice, no First Amendment. They wanted him behind bars. I mean, I got 112 subpoenas for doing absolutely nothing wrong. I don't have a laptop from hell. I've always been a great kid. No drinking, no drugs, no nonsense. Believed in God. Always ran a perfect company. Worked hard. And I see people on the left who got away with absolute murder. And they didn't do a damn thing about them. I mean, my father was, got charged 91 times. Yet, you had people laying bricks on street corners all over this country to get thrown through windows, during the summer protests, and no one did a damn thing about it. And it's just, the book is very raw. It's very unfiltered, and it's very, very real as to the fight that this whole nation was going through, and my family was going through, and the movement was going through, and ultimately Charlie went through, right? I published it 3 days before, Charlie's assassination. You better believe that would have been the final chapter to a book called Under Siege, because that's exactly what they tried to do to us.
This is the point that I wanted to drive home. Everything you just listed so eloquently, and I don't want to sound indelicate, but it was something I was struggling to frame this week myself. I was frustrated by the reaction to Charlie's death by some who I felt like were just waking to the severity of what you just laid out. I don't know how else to say this, Eric, and so forgive the indelicacy of it. But you almost, having gone through all that you did as a family, when you see Charlie murdered, you must have thought to yourself, I'm really not surprised given the state of the American left. Is that, I'm sorry to say it that way, but this is not your first rodeo, is my point.
I was sitting, in fact, exactly where I'm sitting right now. I had two kids on my lap. Laura was sitting next to me when I saw, the bullets fly at my father. And 6 weeks before I got criticized, Chris, I was on Sean Hannity, and I said, listen, they've tried everything. I pretty much went through the same list that I just told you, and they've tried everything they could to take the man down, from silence to weaponization of the media, to weaponization of law enforcement, to all the things I just mentioned. And I wouldn't be surprised if they tried physical harm. And, I got a bunch of articles the next day. Eric, conspiracy theory, thinks they're going to try and hurt his father. And then sure enough, 6 weeks later, they tried to kill him. And again, they tried to kill him again. And then they tried to kill Kavanaugh, as you know very well. And they tried to kill, Steve Scalise, as you know incredibly well. We all saw exactly what happened at that baseball game. And so, no, this didn't surprise me at all. I mean, when somebody has lost the argument, when they've lost the narrative, they usually revert to violence, and they've lost the narrative. We won the popular vote in this country, as you know better than anyone. We won every single one of the swing states. Every state in this country, all 50 states, they all tacked to the right, and significantly to the right. We won Miami-Dade, which hasn't been won in 37 years. We won Miami-Dade County by 11 points. A county that hasn't been won in 37 years, we won. There was 11 counties in California that we won for the first time, right? The reality is they've lost the narrative with the American people. The American people don't buy their nonsense. They don't like the anarchy. They don't like the violence. They don't like what's happening. They don't like the fact that they can't go to stores in major cities without, having to get the store manager to unlock plexiglass covers so they can get Tylenol, because they've let disorder get out of control. They hate the war against our law enforcement officers. They hate seeing our country get ripped off. They know that everything that happened with Biden, they know he wasn't there, and it was the greatest media cover-up in the history, of the country. They know that their kids are being indoctrinated in the school with these kind of far-left ideology when they just want their kids to learn math and learn how to read and become productive citizens. They feel God fading out of society. They feel the Constitution in this country under attack, and people are pissed off. And the left has realized that they've lost the narrative, and that's why they're resorting to violence. And it's deeply, deeply tragic. We cannot allow it to happen in this country.
Eric Trump's book, it's brand new, and it's a must-read. Everyone needs to understand it well, from cover to cover. Under Siege, My Family's Fight to Save Our Nation. With just about a minute to go, Eric, I wanted to ask you, do you have confidence, based on your conversations with your dad, to the extent you can share them? I don't want to betray confidences, but the American people feels exactly what you just said. We feel it. We've experienced it. We've been on the other side of it. Do you have confidence in this DOJ and this FBI, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino? Are you confident? Is the president confident, to the best of the ability you can speak on his behalf, that these people are the right people to get to the bottom of this and exact justice on everything you just laid out?
There's no question about it. I mean, I know Kash has been a very good friend of mine for a long time, and he is a good man. And what a job they did with Charlie's shooter. I mean, that guy got away. He was away, and they were tracking him down. What was it, 32 hours? He did a great job. Dan Bongino is one of the great Americans. Pam Bondi is an amazing, amazing person. There is no question that they're going to restore law and order to this country. That they're not going to focus on spying on presidential campaigns, and they're going to put murderers and criminals and gang members and MS-13 behind bars, and they're doing that more effectively than anyone. Hence, what you've seen in Washington D.C., where you see these crime rates fall through the floor. Right? They made an active commitment, and it's working, Chris. It's working incredibly well. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of my father. He's doing an unbelievable job, and he's got a proud son. We won it despite everything that they threw at us, and I think that's the greatest testament of all.
I'll tell you what, he's over there charming the pants off of him in the UK right now. It's amazing to see how that's going down. You've been in the room for those things. I wish we could stay and chat some more. Maybe I'll have you back for another one. But this book, I'm telling you, seriously, your testimony, the way you lay this out, the way you make the case against this government that was weaponized against your father, and it was an organized government attack and assault on your father and your family. Under Siege, My Family's Fight to Save Our Nation. Please pick it up today. Eric Trump, thank you so much for your time this morning.
You're the greatest, Chris. Thanks.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.
We're so pleased to be joined by the Lieutenant Governor, who has been the chair of this, which has been tremendous. Now, this is your second meeting, and we're so glad to be with you.
Yeah. This is an incredible day. So the president and I started talking about this in November after he was elected, and he loved the concept. And he's a man of vision and action really quick. So he said, okay, let's get Franklin Graham, let's get Paula White, let's get Cardinal Dolan. I mean, like in the first couple of minutes. And then we built this team of historians and lawyers who have taken these cases before the Supreme Court, that know the issues, who know all the witnesses, and can help bring us the right people where their religious liberty has been attacked. And we've just come together to remind America of this magnificent inheritance our founders gave us, and that has really been chipped away by the courts in the last really 5 or 6 decades. And we need people to know they can pray where they want, when they want, and to whom they want.
Can I tell you about the composure of these kids? I know you saw it. Some of them have spoken here before the president today. Remarkable children and young adults.
Yes. Well, think about the fact that they had the courage to stand up to their school district or to their teacher, along with their parents. And I also thought was interesting, you saw our youngest one, her father standing behind her, and the other two, their parents were here. But we as a family have to make sure that our schools, places where we work, a government agency, that no one takes away our right of religious liberty. Think about this. It was the first amendment to the Constitution, because once you take away religious liberty, then everything else is easy to take. Because if I can pull your faith out of you and make you be quiet and not share it, everything else is easy. So that's why this commission was formed, to remind people of their rights and to restore America.
You spoke of how significant it is to have the president's backing here. Yes. We've not had a president. You said in your words, we've never had a president quite like this in this arena.
Yes. He has been open to this from day one, going back. We've now known each other for, I guess, more than 12 years when he got into politics. But he has always been open to people of faith. And he understands, as Eric Metaxas said, the great author earlier, you cannot have a country if you do not have goodness, and you can't have goodness unless there's someone directing your path.
Yes.
And we are strong because we've been a nation of faith. And when we're weak, it will be because we've taken away those religious liberty opportunities for people to speak. And it's in our first hearing, there was a comment. We have to be careful that that people don't say, well, we want to give you the freedom to worship. It's a little bit of a trick, because what they really mean is you can worship where you want. The synagogue, the mosque, the Catholic Church, the Protestant church, wherever, you can do that, but don't bring it outside. Don't bring it into the schoolhouse. Don't bring it into the townhouse square. So this is what this country was built upon, and that's what this president wants to restore, and he sees it clearly.
Lieutenant Governor, I know you got to get to go for your lunch. We really appreciate your time and your invitation here today.
Well, remember what Scott Turner, our Secretary of HUD, said. We want 1 million people to pray for this country unceasingly until July 4th of next year for the supercentennial. 2 Chronicles 7:14, as he quoted, I used to think when I was a new Christian, if my people, that those were all Americans. Well, not all Americans are believers. Mm-hmm. So if my people, who are my people, they're the Christians need to stand up and take it back. In the book of Jude, he says we must contend earnestly. Yes. Contend earnestly means fight back.
The president acknowledged him in the auditorium a little earlier today. Ralph Reid, who is with the Faith and Freedom Coalition, 10 million doors, he pointed out, that you knocked. Right. For the campaign. That I don't think I'd heard that figure until today.
No, it was historic. I think it's the most voters ever directly contacted at the door in their homes by an organization outside the Republican Party on the center right in American political history. It means that with an average of about 1.7 to 1.8 registered voters in each of those homes, we reached 17 to 18 million Christian voters at the door, and we know from our past after-action analysis that bumps turnout for those voters 7 to 11%. So we've quite literally turned out millions of Christian voters who otherwise would never have gone to the polls.
Ralph, this is something, you're in politics a long time. I've never really understood it. It seems like every exit poll, every post-election analysis of elections, there's a stunning number of evangelicals who sit it out for one reason or another. They don't. Do you have an insight as to what that is and how that can change? Even though I know they came out in big numbers for President Trump, still not where they could be, and particularly when you're talking about midterms, how important they will be.
It's very important. I mean, look, the reality is in a free society, you can't make people vote. So it isn't just Christians. There's tens and tens of millions of people of no faith at all faiths, of all races, that just don't show up to vote for one reason or another, and you can't get them to vote unless they feel that they're being directly harmed in some way. And I think in 2024, many of them, because of inflation, because of the cost of housing, because of the crisis on the southern border, the
culture. We heard the stories with the kids in here.
Yeah, the culture, the gender issue, all these things together created a toxic stew for the Democrats that really drove Christian turnout. And then, without taking credit for it, I do think that the effort that we undertook made a difference. It was the largest ground game operation in the Christian community in history. Yes. And we put voter guides in churches, and we texted voters, and we used AI to engage in a conversation with them about making a plan to vote. And we saw, without giving away proprietary and confidential information, because we track it every night during the early vote. We don't wait until Election Day. We're contacting these people. We're encouraging them to vote early, either by mail or in person. And I can just tell you that there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Christians, evangelical Christians and faithful Roman Catholics, who voted early in every battleground state, who had not even bothered to vote in either 2016 or 2020, and it was more than Trump's margin of victory in every battleground state by a multiple. So when we vote and when we stand as a community the way we're capable of, it's the largest, most vibrant, most energetic, and most important single constituency in the electorate.
That early vote was so big, wasn't it? I mean, that was everything. Conservatives don't like that. They usually like Election Day. Yeah. Trying to convince people, let's do the early voting thing like Democrats do, was a big component of this successful campaign.
Yeah, and the president is correct that early vote, and especially mail voting, has been abused by the other side. He's right about that. But until the rules are changed, if we're not voting early, it's asymmetrical warfare. I mean, they're playing by one set of rules and we're playing by another. Yeah. And I can just tell you, as somebody who didn't just start doing this yesterday, I've worked on 12 presidential campaigns. I co-chaired the youth effort for Ronald Reagan. That's how long I've been doing this. In 2000, when George W. Bush was elected president, by 537 votes, in a single state, the state of Florida, we estimate that we lost 2 million votes nationwide by people who didn't vote because they were either traveling, they got sick, another family member got sick. So I'm a strong advocate of the early vote. Yeah. If I can take Christian voters who are with us and I can vote them early and get it over with so that on election day I can concentrate on swing voters, I would much rather do that.
Final thing, Ralph, before we wrap, I know you're busy today. The Johnson Amendment, the president really hammered on that.
Yeah.
I'll confess my ignorance to it historically. I'd heard of it, wasn't really familiar with it. Can you talk about it and eradicating it and why it's important?
Well, the Johnson Amendment was an amendment to the 1954 Internal Revenue Act that basically said that if a pastor or the head of a tax-exempt organization, by the way, not just religious, but any tax-exempt organization, engaged in political speech and engaged in any expenditure by that tax-exempt ministry, church, or other organization, that it was the death penalty. That you didn't get fined, you didn't get a reprimand, you didn't get a rap on the knuckles. I mean, you lost your tax-exempt status, which will destroy a major ministry. So historically, it's been kind of a sword hanging over broadcasting ministries, over churches, and over pastors and clergy to intimidate them from being able to engage in perfectly constitutional and legal political speech with a political content. And let's be honest, if you're a faith leader and you are speaking truth to power and you're speaking out on great moral issues, whether it's segregation in the case of Martin Luther King or abortion in the case of a more recent faith leader like a Jim Dobson or a Pat Robertson, how can you not veer into touching on politics? So it was an attempt to stifle, to intimidate, to silence, and deny the First Amendment rights of Christians. So what President Trump did was he ended enforcement of that provision. Now, unfortunately, that provision is still on the books, but it is effectively no longer endorsed. And what the president didn't mention today, because it's not fully done yet, is the Department of Justice, under his leadership and under Attorney General Pam Bondi, has gone into court in a case begun by the National Religious Broadcasters and by Intercessors of America, and they have challenged the constitutionality of the Johnson Amendment. And the Justice Department has filed a brief with the court and said, we no longer believe that it is constitutional for us to enforce this in a case where a pastor or religious leader endorses a candidate. So the endorsement of a candidate would drop out. So without Donald Trump, none of this would have happened.
It's huge.
So it's a really big deal. By the way, not necessarily because we are necessarily encouraging pastors and faith leaders to go out and endorse candidates all the time. We're not. I mean, that's up to them.
But if a pastor wants to stand for something biblical that happens to be in the politics
and if that biblical or moral issue is an issue of distinction and separation in a political race or an electoral contest between two candidates, there's no reason why they shouldn't be allowed to speak to that.
Amen.
So it's a big deal. I'm glad he mentioned it. It's not done yet. It's one of those things that we're making enormous progress on. Much work still left to do.
This was exciting. It was nice to meet you and the work you've done, seeing so many people in there who are fighting. I mean, from young kids, 9 years old on up. It's just incredible. Real pleasure to see you in person, sir.
Thank you.
When we return on the Lion Week in Review, our weekly celebration of America's coming 250th anniversary, Faith and Freedom 250. That's when the Lion Week in Review continues.
Welcome to Faith and Freedom 250, a special video series from the Herzog Foundation. As we approach America's 250th birthday, we're exploring the spiritual foundations that shaped our nation. Today's episode reveals how sweeping religious revival known as the Second Great Awakening helped inspire a wave of moral reform in the 19th century.
Some of the greatest social reform movements in American history can be traced back to the Second Great Awakening, a religious movement that swept the nation from the 1790s through the 1830s. What it meant to be an American was challenged, fought over, and redefined during and after this period. The Second Great Awakening ignited a fire in those seeking change, spiritually, socially, and politically. Many of the issues that rose to the surface during this time would take generations to resolve. Some weren't even settled until the 20th century, but the impact of the Second Great Awakening on American culture, it was permanent.
Like the First Great Awakening, the second started in the churches. As the young nation expanded westward, it was Methodist and Baptist traveling preachers who led the charge across the frontier. They preached emotional conversion experiences and emphasized a direct, personal relationship with God, with no need for intermediaries. This idea that individuals could interact with God without institutional gatekeeping was both mentally and spiritually liberating, and it sparked grassroots movements that would reshape the American culture. Notable among those cultural alterations were the abolition of slavery, temperance movements, suffrage rights, as well as reforms in prisons and education.
By the mid-19th century, the abolition movement to free all those in slavery had become a powerful force. While not all abolitionists were evangelical Christians, many of them were fueled by the moral urgency unleashed during the Second Great Awakening. Books, plays, and newspapers carried that message farther and faster than ever before. The Liberator, an abolitionist newspaper published by William Lloyd Garrison for 30 years prior to the end of the Civil War, echoed the fire and brimstone language of the Second Great Awakening. Its moral calls to action, especially the call to end slavery, were impossible to ignore for many God-fearing Christians.
In 1852, Harriet Beecher Stowe, daughter of famed preacher Lyman Beecher, published Uncle Tom's Cabin. It exposed the cruelty of slavery and galvanized the abolitionists, providing a Christian cause to the end of the institution of slavery throughout the nation. Another major voice was Frederick Douglass, former slave, brilliant orator, and gifted writer. Though not an evangelical, Douglass often used the structure and language of revivalist preaching to move hearts and minds, sharing his own story of redemption in a way that resonated with the culture shaped by the Second Great Awakening.
But the Second Great Awakening didn't just influence abolition. It also sparked movements for equality among the sexes. In 1848, the Seneca Falls Convention put women's suffrage front and center. That fight wouldn't be won until 1920 with the 19th Amendment, but the spiritual foundations had been laid. Some early women's rights leaders like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony emerged in the wake of the Second Great Awakening, even if they were not part of it. They argued that if men and women could each have a personal relationship with God, then they should also enjoy equal rights on earth. Their work wasn't only political. For many, it was deeply spiritual.
The temperance movement was often championed by abolitionists and women suffragists. They believed alcohol was a root cause of society's moral decay. Several new denominations born out of the Second Great Awakening, including the Shakers, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the Seventh-day Adventists, required temperance from their members. Other Christian denominations which had flourished since the First Great Awakening, specifically the Baptists and Methodists, had long supported that movement as well.
Other reformers turned their attention to schools and prisons, two institutions rife with corruption and abuse in the mid-19th century. Inspired by the call to salvation, evangelical missionaries entered these spaces not only to share the gospel, but to lead others into personal relationships with Christ. Motivated by a sense of moral responsibility, they brought biblical conviction to efforts that aimed to restore dignity, order, and moral purpose.
On the national stage, the Second Great Awakening gave many Americans the strong conviction that faith should drive public action. The settlement of the West was framed as manifest destiny, a Christian nation's divine right to expand and control the continent, and a duty to evangelize the indigenous people residing there. President Abraham Lincoln used strong religious language and biblical texts to make a moral case in the struggle to preserve the Union and to end slavery in the United States.
And on a personal level, the message was clear. Eternal salvation was available to everyone, regardless of wealth, education, or social status. Rich or poor, slave or free, every soul mattered. That belief was revolutionary then, and it's still powerful today.
The Second Great Awakening wasn't just a moment in time. It was a moment that changed hearts, culture, and the moral direction of the country. At the Herzog Foundation, we believe that understanding this spiritual legacy is essential to preserving the freedom that it inspired. To learn more or watch additional episodes of Faith and Freedom 250, visit herzogfoundation.com. Thanks for watching.